Hey, welcome to Guitar Knobs, the guitars, gear, noise, and nonsense podcast, hosted today by these knobs.
Tony Dudzik, pick Guardian.
Jared's handling a broken tree.
Ouch.
Billy Spitfire.
Hey, everybody, it's me, Todd Novak. Welcome to the Guitar Knobs podcast. We are thrilled to death that you are listening to our show, the Guitar Knobs podcast.
Yes.
Yeah,
Tony,
really excited.
Baloney,
Yes.
and Billy. Tony, what do we do on the show? Okay.
You know, Todd,
For all the new listeners.
for the new listeners.
We get lots of new listeners.
And sometimes we have to remind the old
That is
listeners,
true.
too.
That is true.
We talk about gear.
Yes.
We talk about boutique gear. We talk to and from the movers and the shakers and the makers and the breakers.
Yes.
People that make this stuff. We usually have them on. We talk to them. We just talked to Lindy Fralin last week.
I mean, that was incredible.
It was very good.
Yeah.
But, you
Great
know,
dude. Learned a lot.
we love gear, and we hope everybody listening loves gear.
Yeah.
And maybe everybody
Well,
learns
that's why
something.
we pulled Billy on, because he's got gas.
He's a gear
bad,
nut.
Bad gas.
Whoa, easy.
I'm a gear lover.
Back
Yep.
off, buddy. You got gas.
Yes.
And then we occasionally, and
Yeah.
tonight is one of those times where we do a 101, where we do a deep dive
That is true.
into a specific subject.
And they're called 101s because we talk about things so that we are more generally informed. We're not, we'll get into some specifics, but
Yes.
this is our chance to go, hey, let's really get our heads around a topic from a layperson's perspective.
Yes.
Yeah. And by the way, I rolled over Jared being, having a tree broken, but his huge tree actually did fall down, and he's trying to deal with it. He's out in Nashville, and he's like, can you guys, can't you guys postpone the show? And I'm like, no, we're all set, man, because he loves the 101s.
He does
we missed
love
you,
the
Jared.
101s.
Sorry you can't be here for this one. Anyhow, we have got a great show. This is going to be super fun, and we have our Mr. Superhead Wonderbrain Tony, who truly does astound and impress me with his guitar knowledge. What you guys don't hear outside of the show, it's like it just never stops, and I'm always just like, wow. That's so. I'm just very happy to know you, Tony.
Oh, thank you, Todd. Who are
And
you?
I'm impressed by you.
I know everything about guitars. I don't know anything
I don't
about
know,
people. I have no social skills.
No, that's true. Anyways. Well, I'm losing my train of thought. Yeah, so we're Guild Guitars. Guild Guitars.
Guild electric
specifically
guitars.
electric guitars.
Electric
That's
guitars
correct.
today.
That's correct. And we're going to talk about all kinds of great things. We're going to learn some things. It's going to be fantastic.
Yes.
We have a few announcements to get out of the way. We need to thank I don't know where that started, but that's for Rode mics down in Australia. And Billy, how's it feel to be talking on a Rode microphone?
This is a Rode microphone?
It is.
It sounds wonderful.
Doesn't it?
Wow.
I know. That's what we said. That's what we say every single time we get on them. So thank you to Rode for providing these and for making some just all-around really great gear, especially for content makers. And so many of you listening are making content in some capacity. It doesn't have to be, heard by millions. It can be heard by a few. It can be heard by none. But if you want to record it or capture it, Rode makes a ton of great gear to be able to do that.
Did you say they're from Australia?
They are.
I named my dog Iggy after Iggy Pop, but guess what kind of dog he is? He is an Australian cattle dog.
Wow.
Because of Road Warrior. Road Warrior.
Wow. That's like
he had a
that's
so
crazy.
I'm just making connections here.
Yeah,
Road.
man. Hey, this is a really, really big deal.
Yes.
Legitimately. So one morning, and a couple days ago, my phone started kind of going crazy, and I was like, "What is going on?" And we were informed by a few of our fantastic supporters that you know what the only thing better than being number one is?
Number two.
Being number two. So wrap this around your head. The knobs are number two.
Personally, I prefer number two.
Yes. So I was just absolutely beside myself when I heard this. We made it onto the 24 top guitar podcasts you must follow
Must.
in 2022. And we are number 2.
In 2000,
That's pretty sweet.
Who is number 2?
We're number 2.
Wow.
Yeah. How cool is that?
2022 is not even close to being over yet.
No,
either.
man.
Let's take it to the top.
Yes, let's take it to
tippity
2.5. I love it. So I just want to thank all of our listeners for supporting, for listening, for sharing it with other people that you run into at shows and stuff. We're like, oh, man, you got to hear about this show or whatever. Man, hopefully you say that. Hey, if you want to listen to a couple idiots, you should you send that. But anyways, I digress. I'm very proud of this. I am grateful that I didn't find it. I was just so happy that our supporters were like, dude, you guys are on number 2. That was really neat.
That was a nice email.
Man, I was beaming. And you know what? I kid you not. I sent a text to my wife with the link. She was in class. She's a teacher, and she was preparing her class stuff with her other class people. She left the class to come out to leave me a voice message, and she was actually crying. She was just like, I'm so proud of you. I'm so happy for you. And it means a lot. And I know how much this show means to you, and I know how much you work on it. And that was just really moving.
She didn't say anything to me.
She didn't. I've purposely not given her your phone number. Anyways, thank you. We're number 2. We're number 2. We're number 2. All right. What's going on in our music world this week? We're going to start with Tanya Bolonsky.
Yes.
He's going to tell us what's going on.
Here's what's going on. Mm-hmm. So, in fact, I sent you a message, too, to all of the knobs.
Oh.
This past week, I watched an excellent documentary called My Name is Lopez.
Oh, right.
And it is the documentary, which are some of Trini Lopez's final scenes. This was shot, I think, in 2019. He died from COVID complications in 2020.
Wow.
And for those who don't know who Trini Lopez was, it's an excellent primer. He was, kind of a pop singer, really one of the first Hispanic artists to break into not only the mainstream, but into the Rat Pack. He was a highly regarded artist, singer, and as well as guitar player. In fact, Gibson had 2 Trini Lopez models that they introduced. One of them is basically like an ES335 with the diamond-shaped F-holes, one of Dave Grohl's personal favorites. And the other one is a full-size fat body with sharp, pointy horns, but it does have a 6-in-line headstock, Todd. And that was he was really one of the few artists that have more than one artist model. So I know it's on. I watched it on Amazon Prime. I know it's on a couple of other things, but it's called My Name is Lopez. It's an excellent watch, if for nothing else.
I'm looking forward to watching it this weekend.
Secondly, I was looking at the latest issue of Vintage Guitar Magazine, and I found this really interesting because there's an article on a 1968 Epiphone Les Paul prototype.
Oh.
So in the 60s, about 66, 67 maybe, Gibson, who owned Epiphone at the time, had not made Les Pauls.
And still do, I hear.
They still do, yes. That is correct. But at the time, they were actually making Epiphones side by side with Gibsons up in Kalamazoo, Michigan. A proper Les Paul had really not been in place since about 1961, 62 maybe. There might be some ones floating around out there. Mm-hmm. And so there was a plan to have Epiphone release a Les Paul model. In this case, this one is a double cut, but there's been some prototypes of single cut, like true Les Pauls.
That is interesting. Epiphone never released a double cut.
Well, newer ones, yes.
No, but before they re-released the double cut,
right?
They never did. They'd done a whole bunch of other ones, but not a double cut.
They had never done a Les Paul, period. And unfortunately, this guitar is kind of a victim of timing, because at about the same time, Gibson was in discussions with a company in Japan to introduce, basically roll the Epiphone line into a total import, which is exactly what happened. By 1970, all the Epiphones were made in Japan.
Because previous to that, Epiphones, they were really nice. I'm not saying that there aren't nice ones, but
early 60s,
they were right up there with,
the very tail end of the 60s. I would put some of those up against against Gibsons.
Yeah.
So because they were side by side made, but it's really cool. It's an interesting history lesson, I guess, because they had been thinking of doing this, and then they got sidetracked into going, talking to Japan to have them make all of the Epiphone line, which is what happened. And some of those early Japanese Epiphones are incredible too. But it's a real interesting article. It's in the latest Vintage Guitar magazine.
That's really cool. Well, thank you for that. Billy, how about yourself?
So this week I had
comedic genius over here.
Yes, my friend Gene in Lancaster sprayed the top of my Gibson, my 80s Gibson Explorer.
With?
White.
On purpose?
Yes. Because, it's a really cool guitar. It had a history. First, the guy that owned it knew Dimebag.
Is this a bad story? It sounds like it's going to end badly.
No, it's
good. Okay,
it's a fantastic story.
Okay, got okay.
So anyway, so basically, the previous owner had painted it like Daryl Dimebag with camouflage, and then he painted it with Five Finger Death Punch stuff with the skull and the hand, and and it was cool. It was fascinating, right? But I was like. But when he sold it to me, he said, I'm getting rid of it because I'm putting those things in the past. There were some, just various stories along the way that were good memories, but some that were bad. And he just wanted to move on.
Right.
And so he was, voluntarily selling that guitar, to symbolically represent his own metamorphosis into the next stage. And so he said, do with it what you need to do. Mm-hmm. And so I said, I need to make this into a mathematics guitar.
I love it.
So I had
I'm excited about
the top
that. I'm so excited
sprayed
about
white, and it's going to show up at the next show.
I love it.
Right on.
That's fantastic, man.
Yeah.
I love an Explorer.
Yes.
I really, and
so it will be September 3rd at Rumba.
Oh,
Rumba.
Excellent. Right on.
Yeah. Rumble at Rumba with mathematics.
I love it.
Right on.
And the Explorer.
Very cool. What year?
I believe it's a 1982.
Dang, that's like ours were back to back. The one that I got rid of. Shoot.
Yeah.
Boy, I kicked myself for that one.
Yeah.
But that got me into other stuff. So whatever.
So it's now down to it was an HSS. Now it's just down to a double coil, and one knob. So.
Right on.
The guitar knobs, sorry.
No, that's
it's
cool.
just one knob.
That's what I did with
Although
the V.
I would put a tone knob on, which is normally my thing to do.
Yeah.
Because I do like to roll off tone in certain situations. But,
sure.
So.
Cool.
I'm looking forward to it. That's my week.
Fantastic. You got to share some pictures.
Hang on.
Will do.
How about you, Todd?
Can you guys see this picture as I'm talking? Picture this.
Yeah, you can send it. If you send it to me, I'll post it.
Okay.
On behalf of us. Well, hang on, gentlemen. So I was on Craigslist, and I hit it early morning the other day, and I was like, hey, what's this?
Otherwise, I would have grabbed that.
Right. And I found a black Fender Squier Cabernita double pickup.
Well, be clear, it's a Squier Cabernita.
By Fender. So anyways, Squier Cabernita, but it's in really, really good shape. I mean,
it's clean.
It's super solid, super clean.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, I'm just going to see if he wants to trade some stuff.
Yeah.
As it happened, the gentleman did.
Rah.
So, and I also got to meet somebody downtown by the record store, and I'm like, hey, by the way, you should listen to the show. And he's like, oh, wow. So if you're listening to the show, thanks, man. I love the guitars. Good trade. It's black.
Yeah.
So the minute I'm like, flip, black guitar. Wait, what's this? So Tony,
Yeah.
my gift to you is I need a pickguard.
Is that my gift? How exactly is that a gift?
Because you get to make one.
Oh,
So
gosh.
anyways, here you go, gentlemen.
Yeah, it's nice.
Yeah, it's I'm really, really happy with it. So it's black, maple neck, and it's got, and they're not Filtertrons. They're called Fidelitrons. That's right.
Which is, it's
the same thing.
Fender's take on
Fender's
it.
take on that.
That's really cool.
Yeah,
I like
it's
it.
maple neck,
Yeah.
maple top
Yeah.
on the maple fingerboard.
Yeah.
And you like
Nice.
that? I knew you'd like it.
Neck feels great.
It does.
It's
That's
nice
the first
weight.
thing. It's nice
Nice weight. Yeah.
Like
yeah,
there's no fret wear on it.
I like that.
Yeah.
I like it.
I was just really excited because every once in a while you take a pot shot and you're like, oh, shoot and score.
Yeah.
Nice.
So-
It's in really good shape.
Well done, sir.
Yeah. It's
Yeah.
spanking.
I'm jealous.
Yeah, pretty cool.
As a gearhead, I'm jealous.
Yeah.
Jelly.
Tony,
Yes, Todd.
this is going to be very exciting. You've got Guild 101 for us.
I'm very excited about this, Todd.
I'm going to let you run away with the said spoon. Everyone, Tony Dudzik.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So, Todd, I love Guild guitars.
Why?
They're affordable. Even vintage ones are still very affordable. They're well made. They sound great.
You've already run out of
I mean, it's
great.
and they
feel great.
they-
great.
Billy says they feel great.
Almost every one that I've played, and I do have one that I actually had to sell because I couldn't play it, and it was an old. It was actually a first generation 12-string acoustic.
Oh.
That the neck was so D-shaped, it hurt my hand to play.
Oh, man.
So I had to get rid of it. But all that being said, every other one that I've owned and still own, they're wonderful instruments. And I like the fact that throughout the years, whether it was through Fender's ownership or now Cordoba's ownership, they've been able to maintain the quality and price, and it's just a great brand to be able to have. Now we're going to focus today on Guild Electrics and primarily Guild USA Electrics.
USA.
USA, very good. So briefly, let's just talk a little bit about Guild, because there's a lot of companies like Martin and Gibson that had been around since forever, early 1900s or turn of the century. Guild was a relatively newcomer.
That's a great name for a guitar.
Well, the story goes that the name was purchased from there was a Guild amplifier company that went out of business, and so Alfred Drąga, I'm going to use the Polish pronunciation since he's a Polish guy.
Oh, okay.
He and his family came over to the United States right at the very beginning of World War II. And in 1945, he opened up a music store in New York. That went, I guess, pretty well for a number of years. And then in 1952, Alfred Drąga partnered with George Mann, who was from Epiphone, and he registered Guild Guitar Company. Now, at that time, Epiphone was in the process of moving away from New York to Philadelphia because there was a union issue, apparently. And so Epiphone, in their infinite wisdom, said, well, we'll just show these guys. We'll move to Philadelphia. The nice thing about it is Guild ended up hiring many of the experienced craftsmen that were building Epiphone guitars. So in 1953, Guild produced jazz guitars primarily, and that was really a kind of a direct carryover from what Epiphone was doing. And in fact, a lot of the early Guild archtop jazz guitars are very similar to what Epiphone had been making at the time. by the time the mid-50s rolled around, they realized that the New York workshop was just too small. So they moved to to Hoboken, New Jersey.
Hoboken?
Hoboken.
Is that what it's actually called? It's not Hoboken?
It's Hoboken, however you want to call it. And at that point, that was when the first flat tops or General Acoustics were produced out of the factory there. That, again, went really well for a number of years. And then in 1966, Guild sold to a company called Avnet, and they moved to Westerly, Rhode Island. Now, as far as I can remember, Westerly, Rhode Island was really the home of Guild guitars. Mm-hmm. In 1972, Alfred Dronja was killed in a plane crash.
Oh, my.
He actually commuted back and forth from to Westerly back to his home, and he flew a plane. And I don't know if there was bad weather or whatever, but unfortunately, he died in a plane crash.
That's awful.
But the company still carried on. And really into the, from 1989 to 95, no electric Guilds were produced. And I think that's kind of significant because really throughout that time, there was a combination of acoustic guitars, jazz guitars, and electric guitars. In 1995, Guild was sold to Fender. And in 97, Fender opened a Guild custom shop in Nashville, Tennessee.
Okay.
Which is actually kind of cool. I don't remember ever going there and seeing it, but apparently they did have that there. In 2001, they moved to Corona, California, to Tacoma, Washington, and then ended up
My dad was born in Tacoma, Washington.
Really? Yeah. How about that? Yeah. And then finally in New Hartford, Connecticut. And this, again, was, I think, a number of things. Corona, California, of course, is the home of Fender. Tacoma, Washington was the home of Tacoma Guitars, which Fender also owned.
No kidding.
And New Hartford, Connecticut was the home of Ovation, which they Fender also owned. In 2014, and this is really significant because this is kind of the modern era of Guild guitars. Yeah. Guild was sold to Cordoba, and they moved to Oxnard, California. And that's where Cordoba was primarily known for, classical guitars, flamenco guitars, and they wanted to branch out. And so they ended up buying it off of Fender.
Jiminy Christmas. There's a lot of crazy history right there.
There's a lot of movement. And then finally in 2015, Guild USA opened up shop in Oxnard. So they opened up kind of another space for U.S. production.
Right.
And that's significant because really
That's pretty close to Fullerton, actually, too.
Yeah, it's not terribly far.
No.
It's, it's a little bit north of L.A.
Yeah.
So I think what's important is the...
One, two, three.
Four on the floor. States production since before 1995. So I think that's kind of significant. So that's a brief history. Mm-hmm. Now, there's a lot of questions about model numbers on Guild guitars. Mm-hmm. And some of them make sense. Many of them do not. So let's just kind of go through those real quick. The letter X. X150, X350, X250.
The model numbers.
That stands for a thick hollow body.
That's cool. I have an X160.
That's right.
It's my favorite guitar of all my guitars.
Yes.
Really?
Yes.
Well, that's good.
I bought it from Steve Mitchell.
Yeah.
Who's an incredible guitar player in town. Every time I see him, he says, "Hey, you thinking about selling that?"
Guild
X160.
X160.
It's a rockabilly.
Yeah, it's the.
I have a blue one, but I don't know. I don't think it was made in the USA. It was like one of those reissue ones, like from the.
Well, no, it was probably still made in the USA.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
So does everybody ask you if it's a Gretsch?
It looks a lot like a Gretsch.
Very much.
But it's definitely a Guild.
Yeah.
It's so cool. Yeah.
Right on.
Then there's the T, which stands for thin hollow body. And that's kind of like the thickness of an ES335, that kind of thing.
Okay.
So basically they used a lot of the same body shapes. They made a thick version and a thin version.
It's like a Starfire would fall under that.
A Starfire, well, the Starfire is its own model, but it's based on a T-series.
Okay, gotcha.
Then there's the M, which is a small, thin hollow body, and that's like an M65 and M75. Then there's the CE, which is a Florentine cutaway.
Oh,
and there's
explain that.
Well, that's a very sharp pointed cutaway on a jazz guitar.
That's my favorite.
Yeah, I know it's your favorite. And then there are really, I mean, there's a mix of things in between, and in fact, some of the
and then a very specific Dwayne Eddy.
the DE. Well, because and I think it's important to point out that Dwayne Eddy became a very important representative for Guild.
Yes.
And they sold a lot of guitars because he played basically, essentially was a Gretsch looking instrument. And, the DE models were very popular because Dwayne Eddy was a very popular guitar player.
Interesting.
And then in terms of when you think about, we talked about 150, 250, 350, 450, the model numbers, generally speaking, the higher that the model number is, the more ornamentation, fancier inlays, different things like that, and usually has gold hardware. So the higher the number, that's the highest on the food chain when it comes to Guilds. And that's for acoustics, electrics, and jazz guitars.
But Tony, we're just talking about
I know.
electric.
I know. Serial numbers. Todd, did you have questions about serial numbers?
Tony, I have a question about serial numbers.
Okay. Well, if you think Gibson...
Oh, by the way, I just looked up on Reverb, a 66 red mint Dwayne Eddy is $6,500.
Yeah.
Just in case people are just wondering, what are we talking about here? But that's also a signature model, so it's probably more.
Those are worth a little bit more. But you can get into some real vintage pieces for... I used to be able to get in for under $1,000, but between $2,000 and $3,000, you can get a really decent vintage piece.
Same year, Guild Starfire, $3,500, right there in front of me.
There you go.
Perfect.
See how you are?
Good to know.
You are so quick on that computer.
I am a wealth of internet information.
So let's talk serial numbers. So, as with a lot of companies, serial numbers are a little bit crazy. In the case of Guild, they get really crazy because they got very specific.
Why do people? Oh, that's good.
I mean, it's in one way it's good because by serial number in certain eras, you can actually tell which model you have.
Right.
So, for instance, let's start with between 1953 and 1959, sequential numbers. Doesn't matter what model, make, or what, it does matter what make, but whatever model and everything, whatever they came off the line, they're sequentially numbered. In 1965 through 69, they did a 2-letter prefix for each model, and then sequential numbers after that. But then there's some that have no prefix, so it gets a little crazy there. Then in 1970 through 79, they went back to sequential numbers. And then really from 79 through 99, they went back to the 2-letter prefix with sequential numbers. So the cool thing about those eras that do have the prefix is if you're not sure which model you have, by looking at a chart, and there's an excellent chart from on guildguitars.com that you can download. It's a PDF, and it has basically a chart with all of these things in it. You can tell which model number you have and about when it was made. From 2000 to 2005, there are no good records. So you kind of have to look at...
Just consider it was made.
It was made at that time.
Okay. Tony, as riveting as all that math was,
yes.
Let's talk about guitar models. Because
Models.
that's where I think maybe the least amount of information is known.
Well, there are, and there's surprisingly there are only
aside from the tremendously obscure history that you've
there's one book that's dedicated to Guild instruments through from 52 to 77. And then there are other issues that they talk more about, specific solid bodies or things like that. So there's not a wealth of information. And in fact, if you go to the Guild Guitars website, you can get a pretty good synopsis of, what happened at what time. So that's worth checking out if you're really interested in the history of the company. So let's talk about the models. And I'll kind of go from maybe the earliest models into, what transpired through modern day, or at least through the 2000s. As we said earlier, the earliest models that they made were jazz boxes, jazz hollow bodies. And, there's most popular, and the one that I think most people recognize is an X175 Manhattan. And that was kind of the quintessential jazz guitar. A lot of jazz guys had those and played them. They had a whole series of X's from 100 to 600. And again, the higher the number, the more ornamentation and the fancier the hardware. Those came out really early on from 1953 through maybe even, and beyond, of course. There were also some semi-hollows, and that would be the M series. That's like the M75 Aristocrat. And those came out in the 50s and 60s. And those actually looked like, they're shaped kind of like a Les Paul.
Is that a direct...
Like the Bluesbird?
What?
Well, we'll get to that.
Okay.
Because, yes, it's the same shape, but the Bluesbird, there were two versions of Bluesbirds. One was semi-hollow, one was full solid body. So that early semi-hollow jazz series or small body series led to other models. I also want to talk about, there's a T50 and a T100. Those are known as, the T100 is known as the Slim Jim.
Slim Jam.
And that's an important model because it is what actually led to the Starfire series. And I think Starfires are probably one of the models that almost anybody that knows anything about guitars, they know a Guild Starfire.
Yeah.
So this was it's a hollow body guitar. They basically, the earliest Starfires were T100s that they painted red. And
still for jazzy stuff at that time, yeah? Single pickups, hollow body?
Yeah, I mean, it again, you're talking, these things first came out in the late 50s.
Yeah.
So we really weren't into the full-bore rock and roll. So, yeah, you could call them jazz boxes, I guess. They're a little bit thinner.
Sha-na-na.
Oh, I love Shannon now.
There you go.
I saw the guy, one of the guitar players.
Bowser. Yeah. Did you see Bowser?
Yeah.
So I wanted to.
You mean the juicy Bowser?
So the Starfires, those are probably the most recognized, and I think most people know a Starfire, even if they just see one. If they think Guild, they think Starfire.
Right.
So in the early 60s, I think 1960, I think the first one came out. There was and these go through, again, these numbering series are a little crazy. There's a Guild Starfire 1, a 2, and a 3. A 1 was a single pickup neck. A 2 was 2 pickups, and and the 3 was 2 pickups with a Bigsby style tailpiece. Then
so that's the T100, T200, T300. Is that what you're talking about?
No. We're talking about actual Starfires now.
Okay, because there's one pickup and 2 pickup Slim Jims, so I didn't know if
correct.
Right, okay.
Yeah, the T100D is what actually became the Starfire.
Gotcha.
Okay. In the early 60s, like 63-ish, they came out with the 4, 5, and 6, and that is a double cut version.
Yeah. Now you're talking.
The 1 through 3s are single cuts. The 4 through 6 are double cuts.
And were they rounded cuts, or did they have points? Like horns?
They were rounded, like a 335.
Okay, gotcha.
The single cut do have Florentine or sharp points.
Okay.
In 66,
missed opportunity in my book.
Well, there you go. They could have done it, but there is hope.
Oh, good.
In 66, they came up with a 12-string version. And this is a funny story because they presented, Alfred Dronja presented the first Guild Starfire 12 to the Beatles. However, instead of George Harrison, who played the Rickenbacker 12, he presented it to John Lennon. And there's a great photo of him presenting it to John Lennon, and George is kind of frowning in the foreground. So there's another missed opportunity.
Yeah.
But, whatever. And then finally, there's a deep version, which they made basically a fat body Starfire that came out in the late 60s, around 69. Now, to your point, Todd, there's a studio series.
Ooh.
And the studios are a double cut Florentine.
Yes.
Which would definitely make...
Ooh, I see it. Oh, my
see it?
goodness sakes. That is gorgeous.
There it is.
Okay, I want that. I want it.
He wants one.
I want it.
He wants it. Hey, Mikey. And those came out in, late, around 69 into the 70s.
Got me all over it, man.
There you go. And you could probably get one for a hell of a lot less than a...
Yes.
Well,
$3,500, not a whole lot less.
Well,
I don't have any stocks to sell to get that.
So that kind of covers everything in what we would call the hollow body, semi-hollow realm. Also, with the advent of rock and roll and the Beatles and everything else, they released solid body guitars, which again, they were known for acoustics and jazz boxes. They said, hey, let's do some solid bodies. So the earliest ones, and they're commonly known in the biz as the Gumby solid bodies because they're kind of like a melted Hershey bar shape. Very unusual, but, they wanted to do something different, and they did. And probably the highest end one was the S200 Thunderbird, and then there was an S100 and an S50. And those...
Thunderbirds are go.
There you go. And those came out in 63. Those ran pretty much through the end of the 60s, and then they shifted over. Many of the model names were, reused as they were kind of like what we would call an SG shape.
Now, wait, I have a question.
Yes.
The Guild Thunderbird, and obviously, they re-released that recently. Obviously.
Yes,
but before that, was the Gibson Thunderbird bass? That wasn't anywhere near that at the same time. There wasn't any conflict of interest.
Well, Firebirds came out in 63. I don't know when the first Thunderbird bass came out. I would say it would have been after that. So
I'm going to look it up while we're talking.
You look that up. So they shifted over. I think they wanted to go a little more conservative. So they saw that Gibson was selling a lot of
63.
Oh, okay. So about
Holy
the same
mackerel!
time.
Where was Gibson on that one? At that
must have fired their lawyers that week.
Yes.
So they shifted over to SG shaped, what we would call SG, not pure SG shaped, but this was a series, like the S100.
It was like an offset SG.
Yeah, slightly offset SG, but cool guitars. And, those, the earliest S100s are really, even the reissues are actually quite nice. But they're a cool guitar and they're very comfortable. So that's one to be on the lookout for. Also, other solid bodies in the 70s, the Bluesbird, which was based on the M75 that we had talked about earlier, they shifted from a semi-hollow guitar into a full solid body. So it was the same shape, same everything, same layout. That came out in 1970. Then in about mid-70s...
That just looks like
it's a Les Paul style.
Daunting Les Paul.
Yeah. The body is a little bit wider than a Les Paul.
More roundy.
Yeah, it is. Because you can't fit one of those into a Les Paul case. Believe me, I've tried. And then they also came out with another unusual shape of the S300 or the S60. It was the lesser model. And it's just it's really kind of hard to describe. It's got a rounded bottom edge, and then it's a double cutaway. And these were just, you see them a lot because they're not extremely popular. You see them on Reverb and
they
eBay.
Almost look like a Rick bass inspired.
The horns, maybe.
Yeah.
It's just an unusual guitar. I've owned a couple of them.
It's unusual.
Unusual indeed.
What did you like about it? You had a couple.
I mean,
of
they
them.
actually play well.
Actually, it looks like it could have been made by Ovation.
I think that's a fair assessment. I think we, yeah.
Billy, I think you need a white one of these.
Which shape are we talking about?
This is the S60 model.
Either the S60 or the
S65.
Ah.
Ba-ba-ba.
So this is...
That one. You've seen it.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah.
It's
These look like a...
Well, how would you describe
like
that?
something you would stir your butter with. Your butter... your butter...
Yeah,
You
churn.
know,
You churn. A butter churn.
You know, yeah, you'd like stick that down in there like a paddle and stir your butter.
Churn it. You don't stir your butter. You churn
your
it.
butter. Yeah, I don't know. It's really weird.
Yeah,
It is.
But
It's a cooking device.
but the necks are great. They're actually
Big
pretty.
headstock.
Well, that's Guild because they use that headstock quite a bit. It's an unusual guitar. It does take some getting used to, I guess, but it balances well and it sounds really good too.
The difference between the 60 and the 65 is the 65 is humbuckers. And the 60 is single coils.
Some of them had single coils, and then the S300, which was the top end version of that, had more ornamentation, better pickups, fancier headstock, blah, blah,
Okay.
blah. So that gets us through the 1970s into the 1980s. What happened in the 1980s, Todd?
Everything.
Hair metal.
Hair metal. Aside from everything, hair metal.
Aside from everything
Yeah,
else.
this is really the late 80s.
Well, the
Are we
late
talking about
80s.
the early 80s or the late 80s?
Well, these came out.
hair metal didn't come out until the late 80s.
So we'll say mid to late 80s.
Mid 80s. Yeah.
They came out with a brand new line of solid body guitars.
Okay.
Some very pointy shapes.
Yes.
Some ones that really, really don't make a lot of sense. Kind of like how would you describe that?
Poorly. It looks like
right.
a Russian guitar. I don't know how else to explain it. It looks like those look like Russian guitars.
Yes, it
It's
does.
spacey.
It's
I
kinda
think It's
spacey.
really surfy.
Well, there were a number of
Like something you see flying in the, across the galaxy. Like,
yeah. I mean, look at that headstock too.
Yeah.
Isn't that kind of crazy?
it's like spidery and pointy.
Yeah. So
really
they had a little foray into what would be considered, I guess, heavy metal guitars and shapes. But at the same time, they also came out with a line of Super Strats and also a Tele style guitar. And those actually, any of that series from the late 80s into the 90s, I think they still made them, are actually really good guitars. They're USA made, Super Strats, Telecaster styles.
Yeah.
Also in the 1980s, the first version, they did a tribute to Brian May's guitar, the Red Special. And
That's right.
that was the first really replica of his guitar. And the very, very first version was not 100% accurate, and they took some liberties with it and made a couple of different styles, different tremolos, different pickups and things like that. But that's pretty noteworthy because, at the time, Queen was still pretty big. In the 1990s, they reissued the S100, and that's, again, the SG-shaped. And you might remember Kim Thale from
Well, that's the first time
Soundgarden.
that I ever was
Yeah.
introduced
Yeah, I was
to.
just going to talk about him.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
let's
just-
talk about him for a second.
Because he had an S100, right?
That is an S100.
Okay.
I went looking for that
Soundgarden.
guitar, but I didn't
Really
know.
nice.
Yeah,
They're really nice.
Yeah.
It's super sustain.
Yeah.
really, really thin necks, if I recall.
Some of them, yeah. To me, most of the S100s that I've played, they feel like a Guild guitar. There's
Explain that, because both of you has now said that.
Well, it's kind of like it's like the Cleveland C. You know,
Exactly. That's a good way to
it's
put
sort
it.
of it's.
What does that mean?
It's rounded, but it's kind of flattish right on the bottom where it hits,
Right.
where it would
Flat
go
but
up-
round.
where-
I'm with you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
It's kind of almost a it's a little more rounded D shape.
guess so,
and I
yeah.
I
think
mean, a less round D.
no, a more rounded.
More round D?
Yeah, I mean the very flat bottom on most Guild guitars, bottom of the neck is not as
We've
pronounced.
done a terrible job of explaining what the it's a Cleveland C or a more round D.
Yes. Well, no,
a D is a half circle and a line. How much more round can you? That'd be an O.
the back.
He's talking about the.
I'm talking about the profile of the neck.
Yeah.
There's a D profile. There's a C profile. This is somewhere in between.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's a Cleveland C.
Okay.
Cleveland C.
All right.
Not a Cincinnati C.
No.
No, that's
No.
the opposite of a Cincinnati C.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
So that was kind of that's a very important reissue, I think, for Guild when they came out with that. It really helped light some
I
fires.
mean, he was all over like every single guitar
Every
magazine had
magazine.
him in that Guild, and like I mean, he was a big influence early on for me.
Yeah, no, without a
I
doubt.
mean, Louder Than Love, like man, that lit me up big time.
So also in the 90s, they reissued the Brian May Special, which was a more accurate replica of his Red Special. And I think he was probably happier with it. I think a lot of people seek out that particular version because it is closer to his
The real
actual
thing.
guitar.
Yeah. That's pretty bold to come out with a like ta-da and it flops and they go, you know what we should do? Let's do that again. Ta-da. I mean, we made it even more closer to the thing that we missed. That
I know. I know.
that could have been absolutely disastrous.
It could have been, but it wasn't. And then finally, in addition to guitars, they also made a line of basses, and I'll just kind of touch on those a little bit.
You
So,
gonna talk about the Jetstar?
yeah, I am going to talk about that.
See, when you asked me what my opinion was of the shapes,
Yes.
and so I would say the Jetstar looks more like Gumby.
Yes.
Yeah. It's
Right.
a reissue of that model to a degree, is it not, Tony?
It is. Yes.
Now,
And then
to be
what-
clear, the
yeah.
Jetstar, probably a lot of you have seen them on your local Craigslist or in used guitar shops. I think a lot of them were out there, and I mean, I always see them used used for sale.
Yeah.
I think the body shape is maybe a little too weird for people to handle unless you really love it.
And
Yeah, that's my own opinion.
and I've picked up several of those, and some of them are super comfortable if the wood is the right weight,
Yeah.
and some of them are super uncomfortable if the wood is not the right weight. And I can't explain it to you, but there's something about the balance
Do
of
you
those.
think there was a
No.
genesis for the idea of that shape, or was it just like, hey, let's make a weird shape? It's like a Billy Bow on acid.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, there was the show, Gumby and Pokey, right? So
Yeah.
I mean,
Well,
maybe
but-
it was
but
maybe
the-
it was a cool shape back then. I don't know.
Yeah.
See, I would say the what is it? The S. Is this the 60?
That's a 300.
Okay, okay. So the S300, that one looks more like Pokey, and the Jetstar looks more like Gumby. So
Gumby and
just saying.
Yeah,
I don't-
There you go.
So yeah, I mean that's kind of the Jetstar is a little bit more Fendery looking, where the S200 is a little bit more sharper and stuff like So it's yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
it's like a paddle with a thumb.
Yes.
Yes.
So in terms of basses, there is the Starfire bass, which is basically the body of a Guild Starfire double cut that they converted into a longer neck, made it into a bass. There's the Jetstar, which is the kind of Gumby bodied shape that again shares the same thing as some of the earlier models. And then there's the M85, and fans of Sheryl Crow might recognize that one. She's known to play, when she plays bass, to play a Guild M85. And then there were the same shape as, we're talking about the S60s and the S300s. There's the B301 and 302, which are that same body shape. And then finally there was I think as we get into the late 80s, into the 90s, there was the Pilot bass. And it's actually, I think it's a bargain because it's a USA-made bass. They generally don't go for a lot of money. They're very comfortable. The body shape is kind of like
an American Ibanez.
Well, it's a pointier jazz bass, I guess is how I would describe it.
Yeah.
And they're wonderful instruments, and they sound good, they play well, and they don't cost a lot of money. So I think that's a real bargain for you bass players out there.
Typically no pick guard.
Yeah. I mean, that was pretty typical of that era of guitars.
Yeah.
But
play clean and fast. I don't need no pick guard, baby.
The pick guard just gets in my way. So that's kind of a brief model history.
Can't play no pick guard with EMGs, baby. I don't know.
Don't get me started.
I don't know if that's.
Don't get me started.
I don't know if that's real or not.
So speaking of pickups,
Yes.
interestingly, Guild is one company that never made their own pickups.
Well, that answers one of the
So
questions
they had no
I have
pickup
for you, Tony.
line.
Oh.
So the earliest ones. Thank you very much.
Yes.
Were made by a company called Franz, and those from the late 50s into the early 60s. And what these are essentially, I would call them very comparable to P90 pickups. They're about the same size. The covers are generally a little more squared off than a P90 cover.
Yeah, they're like template pressed tops, right? Like they've got. By that I mean like they've been stamped metal.
No, these are actually plastic covers.
Oh, okay. Well, and some of the ones that we've been looking at, they have metal tops that are like sort of stamped covers.
Right. Those would be more in the humbucker line.
Okay, gotcha.
So those were, and actually some of those are some of my favorite pickups because they actually, I think to me, sound the best. Even I might like them a little bit better than real P90s.
Oh, really?
So
that's a bold statement, Tony.
It's very bold. I stand by my statement. As with many other manufacturers of the day, like Gretsch and a couple of others, they also use D'Armond pickups, and single coils primarily. Early to mid 60s, they came out with and this is kind of the quintessential Guild pickup, the HB1. They called it an anti-hum pickup, but it's essentially a humbucker with a kind of a fancy stamped cover, as Todd was talking about earlier. And so it makes it stand apart a little bit. Those are some of the nicest.
Think like Japanese style pickup.
Sort of with a raised center section.
Yeah, and just different shapes.
But those are actually some very, very good pickups. They made a couple versions, a full-size humbucker. They did a mini humbucker version of that as well. And again, these were all made out of house, so they just dealt with electronic
this is still
supply
all American
places.
made stuff.
But it's still made in the USA, yes. And then there was an era where they used DiMarzio pickups, and they also used a lot of Seymour Duncan pickups. So throughout the ages, you could find a pretty decent set of pickups. They had some Japanese pickups that were made during a time. They used some Hagstrom pickups and different things like that. But primarily those are the main ones that they had used. In terms of tailpiece and vibratos, when you look at a lot of Guilds, there's the harp tailpiece, which is pretty recognizable. I mean, it's a good-looking cast tailpiece for a non-vibrato guitar. And they use them on Starfires, the ones without vibratos, through really the whole model line. So really nice-looking things. They also used the earliest 60s Bigsby's were true Bigsby's, marked Bigsby. Eventually, they contracted with Bigsby to make Guild-branded Bigsby's that look very much the same, except it says Guild or has a G on it instead of Bigsby. And then in the 60s, they also worked with Hagstrom and used their vibrato system. And that's kind of an unusual vibrato. It's in some ways similar to a to like a Jazzmaster or Jaguar trem system, but it's not as sunk into the body. Like, there's a lot more routing in a Fender body on a Jazzmaster or a Jaguar, and it's and
these were on their solid bodies then.
Only on the solid
Only
bodies.
on the
Yeah.
solid, yeah.
Those only appear on solid bodies. Almost every hollow body or semi-hollow does have a true, a Bigsby or a Guild Bigsby. In terms of bridges, the earliest ones had, basically your typical arch top wooden bridge, carved, somewhat compensated. And they also used, usually on models that were equipped with Bigsby's, they had a Bigsby bridge, which is the cast aluminum bridge. We see that a lot.
But if you see, almost every picture I've ever seen of a Guild with a quote-unquote Bigsby, it is stamped Guild.
Right. And as I said, except for the very earliest ones, like in 1960 or 61 on Starfires, you'll sometimes find actual Bigsby's.
Okay.
In fact, I have a 61.
But if you get anything later than that, if it has a Bigsby, then it's probably been replaced. The original Guilds are
probably been replaced. Correct. There were also the Hagstrom bridge. Again, that went along with the Hagstrom vibratos that they were using.
Now, what years are we talking about?
These are the Hagstrom stuff usually appears in the 60s, into the 70s.
That seems like a weird combination because Hagstroms back then were still being made in Sweden.
Correct.
But Guilds are being made here.
Yeah, and they were buying the parts from Sweden.
That's wild. Because they were similar guitars, very similar. The Hagstrom Viking and the Guild Starfire.
Well, but they only use the vibratos on solid body guitars, as we were talking about.
Yeah.
So
but they even have the same harp, the harp tailpiece. That's also extremely. When I say extremely similar, I mean borderline identical.
Just one has an H and one has a G. Maybe they were sharing stuff back and forth.
Yeah.
And the final bridge that we can talk about is there was a Mueller Adjustomatic, and it was basically a German version of the Hagstrom bridge. Now, the problem with both of those bridges is they don't fit standard size, what we call standard Gibson size tunematic bridges. They're similar in function, but you can't just replace them one bridge for the other. So that's one thing to look for if you've got a bad bridge. You don't have a lot of options. Generally speaking, you almost have to plug holes and drop in a different bridge. Let's talk about weird idiosyncrasies.
Yes, let's.
That's our favorite stuff. So one of the I think they're kind of cool, although they also resulted in a lot of broken headstocks, is on these Gumby-shaped bodies, the S200 Thunderbird and the S100 Polara. They had a kickstand on the back that you could actually kick out and your guitar would stand up on it. And it was not, how shall we say, very sturdy. And it is, there's lots of tales of, those things just falling over. And because primarily those guitars had mahogany necks and mahogany bodies, you either got a headstock break or a body joint break. because they just tipped over or the stand failed or somebody bumped into it and it just...
I totally forgot about those.
Yeah, the kickstands.
I have seen those. Yeah.
Yep. In fact, when they reissued the S200, I talked to one of my contacts at Guild and asked, did you put the kickstand on? They said, no, we're never putting a kickstand on another guitar. So, but I think it would still be kind of cool. The other thing we talked a little bit about when it came to vibratos and bridges was the Hagstrom connection. And those the vibratos in particular, they take a little getting used to because they don't react. They always seem stiffer to me than like a Jazzmaster or Jaguar bridge. And I don't know if it's the spring tension or the construction method or whatever, but they don't have the same soft, flow that you can, if you have a well set up Jazzmaster or Jaguar, you can really get those subtle things. It feels like you almost have to work it a little bit harder.
Yeah, I think it's that string angle.
Yeah, and that's,
it's just so close to the pivot point.
Yep.
That it takes a little bit of inertia to get over it, and then once you're over it, it's okay. But yeah, it's a little bit wonky. That's a good way to put it. Another weird thing is on the S50 and S90 Gumby models. They had it's commonly called the ashtray bridge and tailpiece combination.
All right.
Where you actually flipped up this cover.
Yeah. Like a Telecaster ashtray bridge.
Except this was hinged. And
it was literally hinged for smoking.
To change strings and things.
But for smoking.
But for smoking, too. For Todd's case.
Or stash.
Put your stash in there, man. But that's kind of a weird thing that you see. I remember the first model that I had that style on there. I had to look at it for a little bit because you really have to want to open it in order to open it. And I finally figured out, of course, how to do it.
Right.
And then there's like a little metal bridge underneath that you can raise and lower, and there's a tailpiece part of it that the strings go through. Huh. So it's just this one piece.
Quirky little thing.
Quirky thing. The S100C. So we talked the SG shaped, and I had one of these for a number of years. This is the oak leaf and acorn carved S100. And this was, again...
There have been a couple famous owners of those, as I recall.
Me.
Well, yes.
And some other guy, probably.
Yeah.
But this was, basically an S100, the SG-shaped one. And I don't know if they were machine carved. I would assume they were machine carved. But they had these oak leaves and acorns carved into them. And they're...
Think Lemmy's bass.
Similar to Lemmy's bass.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just kind of a strange thing, and I don't know how many they sold, but they sold at least 2.
Seems like if you had one of those guitars, you'd be singing like Holly's tunes or something,
Or like or Willie Nelson Tony, why did you buy that guitar? I mean, like that's like the most 70s guitar I can possibly think of.
That's why I bought
it. like sweaty alcohol face, like
bread,
bread,
or
shirt's too tight, beard,
Three Dog Night,
Red Zeppelin.
Yeah. It's even spacier than that.
I just thought it was kind of cool. I mean, they're neat guitars.
What do you think about now the diagonal bridge, that
the tailpiece?
Yeah, diagonal tailpiece.
I don't think it really makes any difference. It was just a style thing.
Well, yeah, but are you a fan of that style? Does it matter? What do you think?
Doesn't bother me at all.
Doesn't bother you at all?
Not at all.
Not at all.
I mean, latter versions, they in some of the reissues, I think they used more of a standard Tune-o-matic, Gibson style tailpiece and bridge. But yeah, the slanted block down below, I mean, it's a pretty hefty hunk of brass that's plated.
Yeah.
So it's
I think
literally bolted
I think
to
it
the
makes
body.
a nice break angle.
It does.
Over the bridge.
And I think
I think that's the advantage. The disadvantage is obviously retrofitting with anything else.
Yeah.
I can't put my Duesenbergs on those.
No.
No. No.
You could. It would just be
or a big
pretty
or
weird.
anything else. Yeah, you'd
Yeah.
have to change the holes.
Yeah.
So whatever.
How do you think that they got away with making that model, which looks almost identical to an SG at the time?
I don't know. I don't know if Gibson had trademarked body shapes. I mean, they never did. It was always headstock shapes.
Right, but
You know.
their headstock shapes. I mean, I don't know.
Well, the very earliest guilds headstock shapes were, as it's called, the open book. What we think of the Gibson. Those very earliest ones did have the same headstock shape as a Gibson.
Yeah, crazy.
So, I think things were maybe a little less litigious back then. Although, from some of the stories you hear between, Fender and a couple of other places, and Gretsch and things, I think maybe they were settled outside of court, maybe more so, and they just decided to live.
Well, and on that note, how did the ESP ever get away with making the Vipers? Which, yeah, it's just anyway, just interesting.
Well, I think
Which is basically just a slightly offset.
I think but if it's different enough,
Yeah.
You could say, well, all double cutaway guitars are the same, but they're not.
They're not.
Strat's not a SG.
No. It's crazy.
So there you go.
Okay, so let's move on with
Other
this here.
weird stuff.
Yes.
A lot of the jazz boxes have a master volume, usually on the lower cutaway, and a lot of people think those got added, but in fact those are factory standard. It was usually a little teeny tiny knob, and again, I think it stems from their history in the jazz world. A lot of jazz guitar players would use that master volume to, keep their volume at a stage level or whatever. I'm not sure. In that same token, mini toggles, and we all know that
I
in
love mini
the
toggles.
1970s there were a lot of guitars that were butchered by adding mini toggles and things.
Right. Well,
S100s.
did BC
They
Rich
came-
kind of make those things famous?
I don't know. Alembic always had a lot of
Alembic had,
tons of mini toggles.
That's a totally different. I mean, that's not a consumer grade instrument.
I agree. But I think a lot of the mini toggles, they came in, even PVs, T60s, T40s.
True.
They had it was. I think that was a 70s thing to do.
Yeah.
But a lot of people think like S100s, for instance, the SG shaped ones, think that somebody added a toggle switch. Well, they came factory that way.
Yeah.
So that's kind of not.
I love my switches, baby.
There it is.
Okay, keep moving.
I'm moving as fast as I can, but you keep interrupting me.
I'm sorry.
That's all right. I like this one in particular because
Okay.
most knobs
Yes.
go from 0 to 10.
Yes.
Most vintage guild knobs go from 0 to 9.
No kidding.
Yeah.
Did not know
10?
that.
They stop at 9.
Number 9.
Number 9.
Number
Number 9.
Maybe it's a
Number 9.
It's a whole Beatles thing.
I
don't
always
know.
wanted to do that with a microphone.
You just did.
Number 9. Number 9. Number 9.
The German version. Okay.
Okay. And I think the kind of the last idiosyncrasy, and I think it really does make the guitar, or it says Guild, is the stair-step pickguard.
Yes, that is.
It's a mainstay. The earliest ones,
Yarmon was doing that stuff too, weren't they?
D'Armond made pickups.
Tell us about
D'Angelico.
the,
I'm sorry. D'Angelico.
well,
Sorry.
but tell us about the D'Armond
Well, we
versions
will
of Guild.
talk about that.
Are you going to talk about that?
We're going to talk about that.
Let's talk about that.
Billy's jumping at the butt.
D'Angelico was
D'Angelico-
doing stair-steppy stuff
Yeah.
too.
Oh,
Right?
Well,
Stuff.
his stuff was,
I mean, it was Art Deco up
eight
the
or
wazoo.
10
Art
plies of
Deco,
binding,
yeah,
and
yeah.
those guards are crazy. But I think that I think it's a carryover from the jazz world.
Yeah.
But the earliest guitars
It's
did
odd.
have a more rounded pick guard, but the latter, really from
It seems like the guild stuff. It's like the 90% of it is like yes, and then there's like, but Like every one of the models has like a but, you know, which can be super endearing too. But it's like, I don't know, it's kind of odd.
It's quirky. It's quirky, odd, and endearing.
Yes.
All at the same time.
Yeah. Player.
So let's talk about players.
Player. Do it.
So Guild's first real endorsee.
You're not going to talk to me about Johnny Smith, are you?
I'm going to talk to you about Johnny Smith. Johnny Smith was a famous jazz player in the 1950s, and really the first endorsee of Guild guitars. They made several models.
Were the guitar companies like clamoring? I'm curious. At what point did guitar companies? You may not have this answer. Go like, you know what? You know what would really sell guitars is if we had signature guitars.
Well, I mean, we see it on Guilds. We see it on Gretsch. We don't see it so much. Well, I mean, Gibson had a few artist models. You really don't see it much on Fender models
until the 60s, right?
No, even later than that. I mean, they really didn't start releasing models until the 70s or 80s.
Interesting.
Of actual true artist models. So I guess they felt that there was some value in having a famous player endorse a guitar,
but not a signature. There's a difference between an endorsement and an endorsement.
Yeah,
and a signature model.
Yeah, that's true.
Because the Beach Boys and the astronauts. No, there was another sort of like beachy, like surfy band. It was like called the Astros or the Astronauts or the Space.
Yeah, there was the Astronauts.
It might be the Astronauts. Yeah,
there was.
But they played all Fender stuff, all Fender guitars and all Fender amps.
Not the Beach Boys.
Not the Beach Boys.
But then you had the Ventures.
Yeah,
and working with Mosrite.
Yep.
I mean, so there were. I think maybe it's just for smaller companies. They felt that gave them a little bit of an edge.
Yeah.
And they felt that there would be maybe some built-in.
If I'm wrong about the Astronauts, don't throw rocks at me. Sorry.
Hit them hard.
Go ahead.
Moon rocks.
So anyhow, Johnny Smith played Guild jazz boxes, and eventually his the top of the heap of any Guild guitar is the Artist Award. And they're beautiful instruments, without a doubt. I mean, they are just gorgeous, extra ornamentation.
Sure.
So that was kind of his contribution to help with the design, I guess.
Okay.
Eventually, that kind of soured, so they went looking in other avenues. And Dwayne Eddy is another
he's a dual. Just like Lopez. Trini.
Yes.
Yeah. So Dwayne Eddy was also sponsored by Gibson.
Yeah.
Yes.
Guild and Gibson.
Yeah.
Yes. So
wild.
Did he have a Gretsch for a while?
I thought his initial guitar was a 6120.
Yeah.
And then that kind of led to Guild making them.
We paused really quick to make sure that I wasn't speaking out the side of my neck here.
Or hallucinating.
There is, in fact, a Dwayne Eddy signature model from Gibson that was released in 2004. And it seems to be sort of a nod to the actual Guild guitar introduced, the Dwayne Eddy, which Dwayne Eddy was the first rock and roll guitarist ever to have a signature model guitar. How about that in 1961?
Okay, for Guild.
Yeah.
There you go.
And then also he had a Gretsch model.
That's right.
Wow. All three G's. One of them posthumously. I knew I was going to get there.
You got it.
Keep going, Tony.
All right. Other famous players. How about Merle Travis?
Merle Travis.
You know Merle Travis.
Yes.
He
distant relative of Merle Haggard and Randy Travis.
No.
Okay.
But maybe so. Let's check the lineage.
No, it's not. Let's just keep moving.
Okay. So he played a custom-ordered X500, which was a pretty high-end Guild model. But then all hell broke loose, and there is a Merle Travis model guitar that is unbelievable. You just have to see this thing. It is so ornate, crazy headstock, crazy pickup configuration. It's got an oval sound hole. You have to actually see it.
It's got swirls and ridges. It's got raised.
Look at the binding on that thing.
Yeah.
Star inlays. I mean, come on.
Yeah.
What more can you ask for? So that is a really cool guitar, and I think
He had a Bigsby signature one too,
yes. Yeah, well,
which
Paul,
is even weirder.
Paul Bigsby made that guitar for him. That was one of the first solid bodies guitars ever made. All right, who else we got? We got Buddy Guy, who played a Starfire. Muddy Waters, who played the S200 Thunderbird.
Interesting.
There's a really cool photo of him in like a choir gown playing an S200.
All right.
Gotta love Muddy. Roy Buchanan, he had a signature model, and that's kind of a Telecaster-based model.
Sounds like a gospel player.
No, he's not. Slash.
That's a made-up name.
No, it's his real name.
He had a double. he had a double neck Guild.
Right. That is it was called the Crossroads Double Neck, and he actually toured with that. It was half acoustic guitar, half electric guitar.
Yeah.
So he could use the same guitar and just switch between the two.
Yeah.
Get the two different tones. Brian May, of course, we talked a little bit about that before. He had a signature model. Motley Crue, the gang at Motley Crue, they had the Flying Star guitar and bass. J.J. French from Twisted Sister, he had an X79. And Kim Thale from Soundgarden, we talked a little about Kim too. And that was, I think that was, as Todd said, it was an introduction to the Guild line that maybe, hadn't been around for a number of years.
Yeah.
So that's just
He also plays really, really lightweight strings. I think like eights, if I'm not mistaken.
That could be.
I think
Which
Bowie
is weird
had
because he
a-
plays
oh,
such heavy music.
Oh yeah, true. Yeah.
Yeah, and there's a lot of other famous players too. I mean, I just kind of touched through the,
That's a lot.
there's a lot on there.
That is incredible. I'm gonna fast forward if you don't mind, Tony.
Yes.
I want to ask a couple questions because this history is making me thirsty.
Okay. Drink
so
away.
I think it's fair to say when you're referencing all the noted brands throughout history and retaining huge dollar amounts and sought after guitars and everything, why don't you think I'm going to make the assumption that Guild doesn't necessarily get the same accolade and or desirability?
I think it has a lot to do with the players
Associated
with them maybe aren't as popular, or there are a lot of other more famous players that are playing Gibsons and Fenders and things like that, more mainstream kinds of things. Personally, I think Guild guitars, I would put them up against any of those. I would, especially on the Gibson line.
How much do you think it has to do with the fact that, like, when you look at a Guild, if you looked at a bunch of guitars, it would be hard to say, oh, that one's a Guild, because they look
well, except for the Hershey Bar and Gumby ones, and,
But aside from those,
but yeah, the mainstream Guilds,
the mainstream Guilds, most of the ones that we talked about look like a Gretsch or a Gibson or a Gretsch or a Gibson.
Yeah, I would.
Or a Hagstrom.
I would agree with that, and I don't know if part of it is.
I wonder if how much that hurt them not having like a true distinct body shape or attribute.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point.
Yeah,
but no, that raises a very good point. I mean, there, if you look, you can tell what especially in the headstock, a Fender, you can tell, a Les Paul,
Yeah.
an ES335.
Yeah.
Things like that.
Which is, this is going to be controversial, but I'd much rather have the Guild Studio or the Hagstrom Viking that I have over a 335. Just take away value. Just the appointments and the body style. I like them a lot.
I don't know.
But that's just me.
That's an entry. I mean, there aren't as many. They weren't as mass produced. There's a lot of Guilds floating around out there, but not nearly to the extent of Fender.
I was gonna say that because I remember, in my early days of playing guitar, it's like you'd run across Fenders, you'd run across some Gibsons once in a while, and a Guild was rare.
Yeah.
And then even after I started, after I got through my garage sale phase of fixing up guitars, and then I would go and look in, the pawn shops or wherever. I mean, there weren't that many around, used or new or otherwise.
The most you ever see is, even now, it's at shows, guitar shows, is like you'll see a Starfire here and there, but not much else.
No, it's true, especially vintage ones. I mean, they're not as common.
Well, and when we were talking about Kim Thale, at the height of Soundgarden, before, quote unquote, when grunge hit, grunge had already been going on for a couple of years, everybody, just so everybody knows. You see the advertisements for him playing the Guild, but like you couldn't even find one in a guitar shop, not even Guitar Center. Yeah. It was interesting.
Yes. So I think that, I mean, those are all excellent points. I think part of it is the rarity. Part of it is...
So what is the desirability? Can you guys tell me, like, why you would want one?
I would say the first Guild I picked up with was an S100. I didn't buy it because they were asking quite a bit for it because it was a really, really well-made guitar. And I held this thing and I was like, oh my gosh, it's all mahogany. It had this resonance that felt good, but you could tell it was going to sound good whether it's plugged in or not plugged in, which is always the test in my head, And it was awesome. But then I fell in love with Guilds when Fender bought Guild and they started making these D'Armands, made under the D'Armand name, and they were copies of Guilds.
That's kind of a head screw.
Yeah.
I didn't realize that.
Yeah. So for several years, there was a whole line of D'Armand guitars, and they were all copies of Guilds. They had the Bluesbird basic thing, which was they had the M75s and M77s and
Starfires.
They had Starfires. They had the T1. They had the
T400.
T400. I love that thing.
Yeah, that's a total rockabilly guitar.
Yeah, and they were just so well made, and I got them cheap.
Yep.
Pretty sure I bought them secondhand.
Well, there was a period of time when you could buy them brand new because they were liquidating them.
Yeah.
I'm not sure entirely what happened, but I bought probably 3 or 4 of them, either through Musician's Friend or Sam Ash or something like that, and they were stupidly low priced.
And the cool thing was they had great colors, which I think Guild never really had cool colors. They had cherry.
Yeah.
They had natural kind of a walnutty wood stain. I don't know what it was. So you could never tell what the body was actually made of because they had this goofy stain.
Yeah.
And I never liked that. And then sometimes they'd have white ones and black ones. And that's about all I remember of the Guild lines.
You're right. There were some really cool colors.
But the D'Armands they had
champagne
gold,
sparkle.
they had champagne. They had, a cool jet black with binding. They had reds, brilliant reds.
Yeah.
They had rockabilly oranges. They had some transparent stuff. They had some transparent wood color that you could tell what kind of wood was underneath.
Yeah.
It was cool. So that's when I fell in love with them, and then I kind of went backwards and started discovering the Guilds again.
Yeah.
And And then, wow, yeah. I mean, some of their acoustic stuff was amazing too. But,
Yeah.
Which.
Yeah. We'll save that for another day.
Okay. Yeah. But
quality.
quality.
Quality. I just love a great bargain, and I find these, even though the prices have increased since when I first started buying them, they're still bargains. I mean, they're a third, maybe a quarter of the price of the same vintage Gibson or even a Fender, and they're wonderful instruments. I mean, they're again, I put some of the vintage ones up against any vintage Gibson, and sometimes I might, the Guild might come out ahead.
Well,
yeah, and they did use quality wood too.
Totally.
Because as those guitars dry out over the years, again, the resonance really kicks in.
Yeah.
And they feel magical when you hold them in your hands.
And if, not everybody could go out and drop 10 or 20 or 30 grand on a vintage Gibson, but you can, that was my introduction to Guilds, is I was able to get into some really great guitars for not a lot of money at all. I mean, there was a time before they even got a little more popular that you could find them for hundreds of dollars.
Yeah, and they're gig-ready guitars.
Yep.
So if you find one out there, well, the re-releases. So, actually, when we were talking a couple of weeks ago, and I had just seen the Psychedelic Furs, Rich Good, who's playing for them, guitar for them now, not the original guitars. He was playing a black Starfire, and he came up there, and I was like, "Oh snap! That's a sweet looking guitar. That's a Starfire for yep." And I actually didn't realize that those were reissues. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, I mean, those are.
But still, I mean, the hardware is fantastic. Usually Grover tuners, right?
Yeah, they used a lot of Grover. Yeah.
The bridges were always adjustable and stable.
Yeah. Well, we talked a little bit about this. Why don't we talk about vintage and modern bargains?
Vintage and
modern Guild bargains.
Oh, Guild bargains. Okay.
Yes. So you see this from time to time, and there's always a label on the inside of the sound hole. It tells you what the model number is, or if depending on what the serial number is. But there were a lot of T100Ds that maybe people unscrupulously converted into Starfires, because a lot of the changes between a T100D and a Starfire are cosmetic, but essentially they're made the same. You can sometimes find, or if I think the T100Ds are still considerably less than a same year Starfire. So if you want to get 90% there, 85, 90% there, you can get a T100D for a little less money than an actual Starfire. In the 70s, Guild had a Japanese line called Madeira, and there's some great instruments from that era too. Some acoustic guitars, some electrics, different things like that.
I didn't know that.
Yes. So they contracted with a Japanese company, and they made versions of Guild guitars.
Wild.
In the 80s, you can find some Burnside by Guild. And again, these were import guitars. Guild helped with the design, lent their name to it. And those are very inexpensive. The ones we just talked about a little bit ago in the 90s and into the 2000s were these D-Armon line that came about when Fender released this line of guitars that were pretty much all our Guild guitars.
I just saw this horrifying Guild Burnside Lance. Oh my goodness! It looks like a space crab. That is arguably the worst looking guitar I've ever seen. Nice. Oh my goodness!
And you've seen some ugly ones.
Wow.
Well, not all Burnside by Guild are, worthy of the name.
Oh God! Oh my! It's hideous.
What?
It's like,
What the heck?
whoa. It's like the first time you see the movie Alien.
Oh, man.
Whoa.
Okay, I retract that statement. No, but the D'Armond line, I've owned several. I know Billy has some. They're really good guitars. Most were made in Korea. They're worth checking out. In that same line, once Fender phased out the D'Armond, they kept a couple of the models under the Squier moniker.
That's correct.
And you can find some decent versions of Guilds under the Squier name too.
Yeah.
Hey, just for fun, go look up Guild Burnside crossbow or lance. It's also a headless. It's a headless neck.
Oh,
Well, there you go.
that's
goodness.
creepy. It's like the
That is
thing.
bananas. Okay, continue.
Let's buy one for
Anthony.
everybody.
I know.
All of our Grand Poobahs have to play that guitar. And then, what I really think are some of the best bargains out there is the current lineup that Cordoba has put out. They have basically the full model line, anything that you could want, whether it's a vintage style up to modern day stuff. And some are made in Korea, some are made in China, some are made in Indonesia. And they're very, I think, aggressively priced for entry level stuff. And there's some really cool designs. So those are definitely worth checking out.
Now, those you said the Cordoba.
Yeah.
There's another Cordoba guitars out there.
Well, Cordoba guitars is the classical and the flamenco division.
Right.
They bought Guild guitars from Fender, and now they have the Guild line as part of the deal.
Okay, but they're acoustic.
So Fender doesn't have Guild anymore.
No. The Fender sold. Weren't you listening when I was doing the history?
I lost too. That's
you
crazy.
lost me about 1995.
The brand is
But no, it's
Okay.
There, I think it was 2014.
wow.
So yeah, these.
I feel like if you called up Cordoba guitars and say, "Hello, Cordoba guitars,"
No, they don't answer the phone that way.
I want them to.
I am the most interesting.
Hello, my friend.
I am
You've reached Cordoba guitars.
I am the most interesting guitar in all the world. I don't often play electrics, but when I do, it's a Guild.
Oh boy, Tony, we've learned an awful lot about Guild guitars.
Yes.
Specifically electrics.
Yes, specifically in this case. Can I salute a couple of unsung heroes?
But yes.
I would like to do that. So I would like to salute Leon Tell, who was vice president of Guild from 63 to 73. And then after Aldranja was killed, he took over as president, and he kept
That sounds like a supervillain,
Aldranja.
right? Like a Bond supervillain.
Be nice.
He's got a golden submarine or something like that.
Maybe he does.
He might. He did. Go
Does he
ahead.
talk like a regular
Continue.
guy?
I know him, and he
Todd
does.
said.
Okay. And he was the president. He took over the presidency after Al was killed and kept the company really afloat. He stayed as president until 1983. And then, I think that was an impressive 10-year run with what could have been really
bad
the end of the company.
Yeah.
I'm going to salute, and I don't often, but I'm going to salute Fender Musical Instrument Corporation.
Okay.
Without Fender buying, I think the brand would have gone under because Avnet went bankrupt. They were looking to unload companies, and Fender stepped up and bought it. And under Fender's, oversight, they did release and re-release some cool things like the S100. The Starfire line came back to life. So when Fender took over, you have to remember there was no electric guitar production for 7 or 8 years. And then they started to reintroduce these things.
You know, the world of guitars, think about this for a second. There are not too many industries where, especially consumer industries, where brands have been gobbled up, changed hands, rebranded, reintroduced, reissued, shelved, squashed, buried, reincarnated, resold. I'm trying to rack my brain thinking of like what other product or industry has this same sort of like, if you trace a family tree, you're going to be, and it's a complete mess.
Yeah, I agree.
It's bizarre. And the only one that I can really think of is currently Volkswagen, which owns Audi, Bentley, Bugatti, Lamborghini, Porsche, and Scout, and Volkswagen. It's crazy.
It's total craziness. It's madness.
So crazy, man.
So there you have it, Todd.
There you have it.
That's
and
the
now you
Guild,
know
the rest of the story.
Yes.
So Guild 101, Guild Electrics 101.
That felt like 101 and 102. I'm just going to be honest with you.
Yeah. My ears are hurting.
People who are going to work going like, oh my God, I can't go to work now with all that math.
Stop.
I need a sick day. Oh boy. Well, that was cool. I mean, I love learning new stuff, and this qualifies. So thank you, Tony.
Thank you.
Wonder Brain Superhead. All right. We've got a very special segment that we got to do right now.
That's right, Todd, because at this point of the show, it's my favoriteest part in the whole wide world.
What is that? That sounds like you're trying to be like a little boy.
I'm a little boy.
I'm just a little guy.
Why do you gotta pick on me, Todd?
All right.
This section of the show is known as Would You Rather?
Yeah. Billy, would you like to give that a shot? You got your you're doing your singing lessons. Do it.
Would you rather?
Let's hear you,
That's
Todd.
better. No,
Todd.
we're going with Billy. All right.
I like mine better.
ahead.
Mine is very sultry.
Yeah, go. Not
so much.
Would
Okay.
you
Yeah.
rather?
Sausagey, yes. Sultry, no. Go ahead.
That's a good one.
Yeah.
Glad I thought of it. This week's Would You Rather is from our good friend Bruce Bacon.
Oh, Brucey.
Bruce, he is a non-stop, never-ending
He's a wealth.
a
of
wealth
nonsense.
of information
Yes.
and suggestions.
And nonsense.
And nonsense. All right, we're going back to the hot tub time machine.
My favorite. Speaking of that, the most person that I get, you look like this guy is Rob Corddry.
Oh.
Especially from Hot Tub Time Machine. I think it has to do with my attitude too. So, please continue.
Maybe it's your tattoos.
No.
So, here it is. You can go back in time and give teenage you.
Was anybody not thinking of Huey Lewis in the news right there? Just me? Okay, go ahead.
Just you. A guitar.
Teenage me. I'm going to get a guitar.
No, but you're going to go back and
I'm gonna
give
go
you.
back and give myself a guitar.
And you have to be careful because when paths cross,
Yeah.
you can really.
You can't mess with the space-time continuum.
That is correct.
Except you completely are.
Well, you have to be very careful.
Okay.
It can be done. I'll tell you how later after the show. So here's the deal. You have to choose a guitar, new or used, from the present,
Oh, jeez.
but your budget is $800 in today's money.
Woof.
But when you go back through time, the brand name, serial numbers, decals, and engravings will be wiped off, making this a player's guitar with little resale value. So, you're going to find a new or used guitar, $800 in today's market, to give back to yourself, back in time. And when it gets there, it's not going to have any markings on it, but it's going to be still a really, hopefully, playable guitar and really cool, but no resale value.
No resale value.
What's the rather part?
Does it have one?
There is no rather.
So it's just a would you.
This is a would you.
Okay.
We only have a would you this week.
What would you?
This is what happens when trees split on my property.
Oh boy.
All hell breaks
Would
loose.
you rather have a...
Brucey, we'll let you slide on this one. Okay, so
this is just kind of a
it's a hypothetical
Yeah.
situation.
yeah.
Hypothetical situation. Okay, we'll let it slide.
And then
It's a fun question.
and there's an extra credit question.
Okay, all right.
Assuming teenage you would listen, what piece of advice would you give?
Oh my goodness sakes!
I think
Well-
I'd rather just get the guitar. Oh, no, wait. That wasn't the rather. It was...
That's not the rather.
So you have to do two things, but you don't have a choice.
Well, your choice
This
is
a twist. Okay.
Your choice is you have to find a guitar in today's money, $800, new or used, that you can take back in time. And then what advice would you give to yourself? Okay, you get it?
Yeah.
You following it?
Yeah.
I'll let you know what Bruce's answer after we answer.
Okay. Tony, go ahead.
So I think what I would do is find, what would be a good $800 player? I mean, there's so many. $800 really.
Yeah, that gets you a lot these days.
I mean, it's going to be an import guitar if you're going to buy new.
Sure.
But you could probably,
you can get a lot of great stuff used too.
yeah. I mean, you could find some, $800 would buy you a lot. You know, in keeping with today's theme,
Sure.
I'm going to find an $800 Guild guitar,
Okay.
and I'm going to take it back to myself, and I'm going to say, play this.
Okay.
And my advice to myself would be, no matter how hard your fingers hurt, keep on playing, man, because it'll help you in the long run.
That's good.
There you go. That's my answer. Final answer.
All right.
Okay.
Billy?
Okay. I would get myself a Tokai Telecaster.
Ooh, excellent choice. I hadn't thought about that.
And for $800, I could get the telly
With
like
a case.
a breezy sound,
Yes.
Tokai breezy sound. Change the pickups to something a little more hot,
Yeah.
and then I would give it to my teenage self, and I would say, it's all in the fingers. Alternative answer. I would buy myself, in today's money, an X160 Rockabilly Guild. And I would tell myself, my teenage self, it's all in the fingers. You can play anything on that thing. You can play acoustic stuff. You can play electric stuff. You can play hard stuff. You can play rockabilly stuff. You can play metal. It can do it all. It has de-arm-on pickups, which are sensitive, and yet somehow you can turn them up and they don't go crazy on you. You can turn them down and they get sweet, sweet, sweet. You can turn them all the way down, even sweeter. And they're just, it's truly an amazing guitar.
Cool.
All right.
Todd?
Okay, so originally, I ended to price check this, but when I got my Gibson double cut special, I got it on reverb, and I think it was $700. That was the most expensive thing I'd ever bought. Like, honestly, it's kind of silly to say, but it was true.
You should find a better job.
It has gone up, so it's now over. You can't even get it, which is cool for me because that means it's worth something now. I'm making money, hand over fist, yeah, baby. Honestly, I really love playing my Hagstrom Viking, and that is those go for about $700.
Yeah.
And I would send myself a black Hagstrom Viking because again, the playability. They're so comfortable and easy to play, and they sound fantastic.
Would it have a gold sparkle pickguard?
Yeah. Yeah.
And what would your advice be?
My advice, I'll tell you what my advice would be. My advice would be to ignore the pull quote from the guitar magazine that I read in the shop that is on the bottom of our website that says, playing guitar is like falling down a flight of stairs and landing on my feet, says Eddie Van Halen. Which made me think, and he hadn't taken lessons up to that point. He was just starting to take lessons from Joe Satriani. And he was talking about, like, I'd never had lessons. I'm like, sweet, I don't need lessons then. I would ignore that advice. I would give myself some lessons and just get a better understanding of theory so that I could actually play a lead worth, worth some salt.
I thought you were going to say, don't quit your day job.
No. No. Yeah. So it's interesting, though.
It's too bad you didn't take that advice when you were a teenager.
Yeah, but here's a weird thing is that
From your future self.
on one hand, I wish I didn't take that advice, but on the other hand, I don't know that I would have written the same kind of music that I have up until this point.
Yeah.
Had I, because I might feel like I need to play things a certain way.
Yeah.
So then I would say ignore the advice that my future self who visits you says, which is to ignore the quote from Eddie, which would land me in the same position I am now. Perfect.
I think Marty's parents just got back together again.
I think what you could say is everything I'm telling you is a lie, and I'm lying to you.
Yes, something like that. All right. Well, this has been great fun. Tony, we need to thank them.
Hey, wait a minute.
People.
Did you want to hear about Bruce?
people.
Would you like to hear what Bruce
Yes,
had
please
to say?
tell us what Bruce has to say.
Cousin Bruce says, my answers are a late 90s made in Korea Epiphone Sheraton with a 5-piece neck. It's the antithesis of the Super Strats I liked at the time. 335 shape, semi-hollow, set neck with a stop tail bridge.
I've got a Burst. I've got that same guitar in a
There
Burst.
it is.
That's a great guitar.
Did Bruce give it to you when you
No.
were a teenager?
No.
Okay. And his advice, don't compare yourself to others. Everyone is going to be better than you. So be creative with your own abilities to find your voice.
Excellent.
Yeah. That's
Good
like what
advice.
I said.
Yeah.
Except different.
Yeah.
All right, Bruce.
Except yours involved falling
too
down
are
a
the
flight
man.
of stairs.
Yes. Anyhow.
It's all in the hands.
Yeah.
It's all in the hands.
Yeah. All right. That was super fun. Tony?
Yes, right, Todd. At this point of the show, there's a very special group of people that we love to thank. These are our executive producers, and they make the show possible. What's an executive producer? It's a patron, a sponsor of the very podcast that you're listening to. How do you become one? You go over to patreon.com/the Guitar Knobs and check out a couple different levels in which you can participate, become part of the family, become a sponsor of the podcast.
Yes.
Each level comes with some great thank you gifts. But there's one thing more as an executive producer that you get.
You get to have your name read on the thing.
Your name read on the thing, and that's what I'm...
go cut down a tree in your yard.
It's splintered. It's in a million pieces. So special thanks to these executive producers. Moon Guitars,
Yes.
Veteran Pedals, Drew Lopez, John Halverson, Rick Calhoun, Trevor Gunberg, Elad Mizrahi, Mike D, Richard Kendall, Mark Garton, Matt Hart, James White, Justin Jones, Anthony Gimalero, Bill Gola Guitars, John Esterle, Anthony Lathrop, Stefan Lamb, Michael Senchuk, Ken Sayers, Doug Christ, Darren Gregory, John Anglin, Tom Brazen, Rusty Sneeden, Ralph Gottschalk from Wonderful Audio Technology. What? Don Kloss, Gregory Randall, Brett Hogarth, Eric Hemmer, and Stuart George.
Yes.
Oh, but Todd, there's more because we have to thank these special executive producers we call our Grand Poobahs. These fine folks get a fez to wear upon their head while listening to this podcast. I believe if you're out there and listening, you must have your fez on. So special thanks to these Grand Poobahs. Mm-hmm. Tommy Manasco, Ricardo Igareda, David Kaminga, Brandon Wound Pickups, Hex Matos, Michio Murakishi, Bob Crouch, Jack Cadian, Sam Jett, Tyler Rhines, LSJ Music Company, John Williams, James Pennington, Adam Johnson, Steve Keys, Cody Foster, Science of Sound, Brian Robison, Jonathan Jerusik, Corey Nigro, Michael Van Zant, Tim Nowak, Jonathan Daly, Martin Cliff, Sean Eddie Serratos, and David Poe. Thank you, one and all.
We are so eternally grateful for your support, and not only for the patronage, but I have so many conversations with many of you, and I really do appreciate it. I love hearing from you. We all love hearing from you because I always share all the messages and everything. So
sometimes I get my own direct.
Sometimes, yes. So thank you. Now, Billy, where can people find you in what you do?
Well, I play lead guitar for the Mathematics in Columbus, Ohio. I'm on Facebook as Billy Spitfire. I'm on Instagram as Billy Spitfire. I also have an artist page on Facebook.
Billy's a heck of a painter, by the way.
Billy Spitfire Unlimited.
He does walls. He does ceilings. He's a good painter.
Guitar knobs.
As long as the walls and ceilings aren't wearing any clothes. Well, he's a figure painter, like a legitimately really good figure painter.
Is that like a figure skater?
Different. He does figure skate while he figure paints.
Wow, that's cool.
It is amazing.
I'd like to see
Tony,
that
where can
sometime.
people find you?
Go over to pickguardian.com. Check out some of the things I have available for sale. By and large, what I do is custom work. So shoot me an email. Let me know what you need, what you're trying to do, and I'll take very good care of you. Pickguardian.com.
Yeah. Billy also forgot to mention that he plays in a really killer surf band.
Oh, that's right.
This is true. The Bastard Sons of Neptune.
Yeah, really good.
I played bass in that band.
Yeah, man. Dig it. You can send me an email, todd@theguitarknobs.com. You can also DM me on Instagram. I will share messages, and please send us your would you rathers. And I'm gonna throw something else out there. You know, we've had so many builders. We're up to 300 episodes or so. That's a lot of builders out there. And even if you haven't been on, if you want to get your stickers or pens or picks in front of other people to help grow your audience, or just, connect with the rest of, that's what we give to our patrons, and we would love to pay that forward on your behalf. So connect with me, and we'll get your swaggy bits into our reward packages and stuff. Thank you, Tony, for sharing your knowledge. And
thank you, Tony.
Yeah, it's been really fun. Everybody else have a fantastic guitar weekend. Subscribe!
Oh, yeah.
See you soon.
My name is Michael. I got a nickel. I got a nickel, shiny and new.
Hey, I sent
I'm gonna buy me all kinds of candy.
Hi there.
Toddy, can you hear me? Okay. Talk. Go.
Talk.
Just make a sound.
Yes.
I like that.
All right.
That's cool. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
Okay. Yes. All right.
Can we just do this?
Sorry.
I got a tree
there you
that's
go.
split. It's a squirrel.
Oh, what you got there? A little bear. What do they call these things? Barista.
Gabronita.
Todd?
Yes!
Dave?
Yes!
Dave's not here, man.
Yes! Yes!
I can't hear myself very well. Okay.
Yes!
I primarily like to hear myself. Okay.
Have you ever seen?
Okay, go ahead. You're peeing on your feet.
I got stung by a jellyfish.
True story. Oh man.
That's good. I can use.
Because you guys did cool looking record albums.
All right, give me a roll. We'll go back to Merle Travis.
Stick 'em.
Well, toasted
Yes!
Well, that's it for these knobs. Please visit our Patreon page at patreon.com/theguitarknobs. Visit our website at theguitarknobs.com for all of our past episodes, 4 on the Floor blog, and other good stuff. You can connect with us on social too at our Facebook page and share your gear and stories on our Facebook group. Also, be sure to check out our Instagram at Guitar Knobs. Catch you next time.